Anyone got the Nets for Game 7? You got the Nets? Yeah. I think I'm going the Nets too. Anyway, next question. Second favourite country that you've been to? Go. Australia's your second favourite. What's your first favourite then? Israel. Okay, nice. Second favourite? Cambodia. Nice. Second favourite?
London.
Oh, so England. Nice. Love that. Second favourite? Japan. USA. Nice. Italy. Wow, that's some nice places. Yes, Sam? New Zealand. Nice. That's cool. All right. What? That's, is that your least favourite place? New Zealand. What's your least favourite, Caden? Oh, wow, that's rude. Poor Philippines. Well, I want to start this morning by telling you a story from, I guess it's probably my second favourite place that I've been to, Thailand. Thailand is gorgeous and beautiful and lovely. But Thailand has also been a part of, I guess, my own awakening. My eyes were open to some things. See, when I was 16 years old, I went on like a short-term 2-week mission trip over to Thailand, North Thailand, in kind of like the hills area. And as part of that, we went to an orphanage and we were helping like build a boys' dorm, and we did a whole bunch of other things. But the moment that really opened my eyes to just the need that there is in the world was this moment where I was sitting in the house of a family. One of the kids had been at the orphanage and was now back connected with, I think it might have been an auntie and uncle or whatever. But they were hosting us, me and 10 others. And they decided they would put on the best meal that they could for us. And they decided that that meal would be banana soup, which, as you can imagine from the title, isn't great. You know, like literally it was like boiled water with bananas floating in it and just soaking in that. And it wasn't the fact that I had to eat banana soup for lunch that was the eye-opening experience, right? Now, it was bad, and I didn't really enjoy it at all. But that wasn't the moment. It wasn't like I was like, wow, this is their favorite meal? Life's tough over here. It wasn't like that. It was more the fact that our host, the guy who was kind of like taking us around the area, explained to us that this meal was being given to us at the cost of them. And I was like, yeah, of course. But he said this. He said, these guys are now probably not going to eat for the next couple of days, because they're giving you their meal right now. And that was when it hit me. This was their meal, and it was meant to be a meal that was going to last them a couple of days. And here I am, sitting in the lounge room, Westerner, 16 years old, can get KFC whenever he wants, taking it from him. And that's when my eyes really opened to, wow, there are some people in pretty desperate need. And as this trip kind of wound up, there was a part of me that just came alive. Like, I don't even know if alive is the right word, but there was like this fire in my heart, like the fire in my guts. It was just like, this is not okay. That these kids are going through this experience, that these families, this is what they get to eat for like 3 days straight. And here I am literally going to go home and complain to my mom about the fact that like I have to have Weet-Bix for breakfast again. Like, oh, come on. Like, I want toast or I want Cocoa Pops, you know, like one of those two, not Weet-Bix. It's so boring. But, you know, like we had all of these things and I just came back like, this isn't okay. And I was like, God, what can I do about this? God, what can I do to fix this? And I'll be honest, God didn't give me like any super clear plan or an organization to start or anything along those lines. But I did feel like I need to do something, right? So what I did, you know, like I wore a bracelet that one of the kids made me and I would tell people about it all the time. And I did the 40-hour famine and I did a few of these things. I just tried to tell people about what had happened. And I tried to do what I could to get back over there, do another short-term trip to kind of be there. But eventually, those feelings, those moments, that drive kind of waned a little bit. And as I've gotten older, you know, I'm 30 now, I was 16 then, I've found it interesting that I know more than I've ever known before about the suffering, the hurt, the pain that people go through. And yet sometimes it scares me that I don't seem to feel that same fire, that same drive, that same passion to do something, to see it fixed, to see it resolved. Now, I know there may be some of you here right now, you haven't necessarily had that experience. You haven't had that moment where you kind of know, right? You know that there's people who are doing it tough. Maybe you kind of felt like that, or you know friends who are doing it tough, or you've seen some things on the news, heard some stories or whatever. But you know it, but you don't know it in your heart. You haven't had that moment where you've just experienced your heart break for someone else, for what they're going through and what they're having to deal with. But for all of us, this is going to be one of those things that happens. There's going to be a moment in your life where you realize that things are difficult for people. And maybe some of you have already had that moment. You've had that, I guess, that fire awaken within you that this isn't okay and we need to do something about it. But the challenge for us is we live in a society and a world at the moment where we are constantly bombarded with this. We're constantly bombarded with just all of the things that are going wrong. I get up every morning and go to the gym, and at the gym the news is on, and it is the worst. It is just the worst thing to watch. Literally, they'll just spice in a little moment of literally the other day, I think it was Friday morning, they were like, a little puppy cuddles a baby toddler, and you just watch this puppy get up in there, and it's like, oh, that's so cute and lovely, wow, beautiful. And then it's next story is 3 people murdered last night, drug lord murdered in the streets, these 3 people landslide, hundreds dead, and you're like, wow, this is horrific. And you see it over and over and over again throughout the day. You see it in your feeds, you see what people are going through, and there's this thing that happens that when we see the pain and hurt of people over and over and over again consistently, we start with this sense of compassion or empathy for them. We go, that's terrible. But eventually, because we see it so much, we get what is called compassion fatigue. It's this moment where we realize, wow, that's really terrible, and I don't feel anything for it. Because you're empty. You have nothing left to give. You have no compassion, no empathy left because it's been poured out consistently over and over and over again for all of these different issues that are just getting thrown in your face. And I guess the challenge for us is this idea that, we want to care for people, right? We want to be people that do that. And we want to have compassion for people. But at the same time, you guys are probably sitting here going I'm 14 years old or I'm 17 years old. I have no qualifications. I have no real skills. I have no money. What am I actually meant to do? And we find ourselves in this position of feeling like we have nothing to give. And feeling like we don't even have the fire in our belly that will make us do something. You start to wonder, what's wrong with me? For me, it was this kind of journey of am I just dead inside? Am I cold and calloused and don't care about people anymore? Is that what the problem is? Well, today I want to look at a story that we see in the Bible. It is one that we've heard before. It's Jesus feeding the 5,000. The reason I want to look at this story is because I actually think it has a little bit of an answer for us about what do we do with this dynamic. But also, it's a really important story because it's the only miracle of Jesus that is found in all 4 Gospels. It's found in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The only one. Which says to me that this must be a very important miracle. If all of the guys writing about Jesus' life thought this is the one that I have to make sure gets in, then there must be something really important about this miracle and what it says. So we're going to read it together this morning. It's Matthew 14, verses 13 to 21. It's on the screen behind me. It says this. It says, when Jesus heard what had happened, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place. Hearing of this, the crowds followed him on foot from the towns. And when Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them and healed their sick. And as evening approached, the disciples came to him and said, this is a remote place and it's already getting late. So let's send the crowds away so they can go to the villages and buy themselves some food. Jesus replied, they do not need to go away. You give them something to eat. And they were like, well, we only have 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Bring them here to me, Jesus said. And he directed the people to sit down on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven, gave thanks, and broke the loaves. And then he gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the people. And they all ate and were satisfied, and the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. See, the story starts with this phrase right at the start, and this is just really important background information for us because I think it shows even more who Jesus is and what his heart was like. He says, when Jesus heard what had happened, he withdrew by boat privately to a solitary place. Now, what did Jesus heard? That doesn't make grammatical sense. What did Jesus hear? Jesus got the news, right, that his second cousin, John the Baptist, had just been beheaded by King Herod. So his second cousin, a guy that baptized him as he started his ministry, had just been killed. And so understandably, Jesus is trying to withdraw a little bit to work through his grief. He's trying to have a little bit of space. He's feeling a little bit sad, trying to reflect and deal with the pain that he's feeling, right? And as he arrives at that destination, as he arrives where he wants to go, what is he met with? Well, the story says he's met with a crowd of at least 5,000 men, plus women and children. And what do they want him to do? They want him to heal them. They want him to, set them free from, demon possession. They want him to come and just do all these things for them. Now, I don't know about you, but when I get in a situation like that, where maybe I'm feeling grief or feeling pain about something, and someone asks something from me, don't you just feel a little bit like, oh, please, I'm going through something right now. I'm dealing with something right now. I've got my own stuff going on. That's what I would do. But Jesus does something different. It says that Jesus saw the crowd and he had compassion on them and healed their sick. So what is Jesus' response in the midst of his own sorrow, his own pain? Compassion. Now, here's the thing I want to clarify. What is the word compassion? What does it really mean for us? Because we hear it, but do we really know what it means? Because for many of us, you'll hear like a sentence like this. It's like, oh man, he's such a compassionate guy. He's always looking out for those people. Or, wow, what a compassionate act to, to give food to that family. You might hear it in sentences like that. I know at your age, I definitely wasn't talking about people's compassion and, who they were as compassionate people. But it is a word that we use regularly. And for many of us, it's kind of this idea of, to be compassionate is to be kind and caring to someone, right? That's it. But in the ancient understanding of it, it was something a little bit deeper. To be compassionate was to actually be moved in your bowels, right? That's the word. So to be compassionate would be like, oh, I feel this in my bowels. Now, we all know that the bowels have a very specific role in human anatomy. They help us perform a very specific function that you probably don't really want associated with kind and caring acts. But that was how they described it. And the reason they described it was because while we now know in our modern scientific world, exactly what the body parts do, right? The ancient understanding was sometimes that these areas would be attributed, to different emotions. Anger was felt, and you clench your fist sometimes when you get angry, right? Because it's almost like this idea that I'm trying to keep my anger contained because I can just feel it in my body. Maybe some of you've had a few lovey-dovey feelings for someone, and you just felt like this butterflies, lovey thing kind of sitting in here, and you're like, oh, what's that? And it's like, oh, I must be in love. And you're like, why, right? What does that mean? Oh, I'm in love. I don't understand that. But we feel these things sometimes in our body, right? Some of you get stressed and you hold it in your shoulders. I get stressed, I grind my teeth at night, that's what we do. We feel it in our bodies, right? And the ancient understanding was if you are feeling compassion, you are feeling it so deeply in your body that it is at the very center of who you are. See, the bowels were considered where love and pity were stored. That is where compassion is birthed. And the idea is that it's such a deep emotion, such a deep feeling that you can't help but do something to fix the problem, to do something to be with the person who you feel compassion for. See, we see that Jesus had compassion on them, and what did he do? He didn't just be like, oh, that's so sad that you're sick. He actually did something tangible. He started to heal them and provide for them. See, that is the understanding of compassion. Compassion isn't just a feeling, it's actually an emotion that causes action. And we see that Jesus heals them from his compassion. But here's the thing, right? It's obvious for us to see compassion when someone gets healed or helped, right? But in this passage, I actually believe we see the compassionate heart of Jesus through the whole miracle. Look at the disciples. They are looking at the practical outworking of what's going on. They see 5,000 people. Now, let's put this in perspective. Anyone go to the carols here in 2019? Not last year's carols because it was a bit different because of COVID. You guys went to the 2019 carols? Yeah, great, cool. You know how we would fill the room and you're sitting really close to everyone and it was absolutely packed, right? Trying to remember that many people. That was 1,700 people in that room. So triple it. And you've got just the men that were in that crowd with Jesus. How crazy number is that? And so these disciples, they're like, how are we going to make sure these people get food? And I'm pretty sure they're aware that they've only got 5 loaves of bread. and 2 fish, because they're pretty quick. When Jesus says, no, we're not going to send them away, you're going to feed them, they go, well, we only have 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. And I don't know about you, but I don't think 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish would feed us right now. Like, let's be real. Anyone here gluten intolerant? Yeah, great. You're not getting any bread. You can maybe have a little bit of fish, but I'm pretty keen on the fish. I don't want just to eat bread. But like 5 loaves and 2 fish are not going to feed us, let alone 5,000 people. Disciples are thinking really practical. But Jesus sees people who have had their physical, miracles done, but knows that they need sustenance too. That actually they've walked a long way and they're going to have to walk a long way back. And his compassion compels him to continue to provide for them. He's like, I don't just want to provide you with your healing. I want to provide for your physical needs. I want to provide for you in that way. So his compassion actually causes him to act again, to move towards them, to not just heal their sick, but actually to provide for their needs. That is who Jesus is. That is the compassion that he has. And it's an incredible miracle, an absolutely incredible miracle. Think about it again. 5,000 men, triple the size of the main auditorium, plus women and children. You're most likely talking about 10,000 people being fed by 5 loaves and 2 fish. But here's the thing, this is one miracle that is driven by Jesus' compassion. But as you read through the Gospels and read through the story of Jesus, you'll see over and over again the phrase, and he had compassion on them. So much so that I actually think it's safe to say that every single miracle that Jesus does, all the times he gives sight to the blind, or helps a lame man walk, or raises a son for a widow, or even raises his friend Lazarus from the dead, he does so because he is moved with compassion. In fact, I believe that it was his compassion that drove his mission, that actually brought Jesus from heaven to earth, to actually live among his people, to understand and experience your pain, to see the damage of sin, to know us. It was actually his compassion that sent him to the cross to die in our place. It was his compassion that drew him into our story. It was his compassion that drove him to take on our sin. It is compassion that is at the center of Christ's heart. And while you and I, our culture may suffer from compassion fatigue, I actually believe it is impossible to exhaust the compassion of Christ's heart. I actually think it's impossible for Christ to run out of compassion for you and I. That actually you could take the whole weight of humanity's sin, pain, suffering, brokenness, and it would still not exhaust Christ's compassion for his people. See, Lamentations 3:22-23 says this, because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed. Why? For his compassions never fail. And then this, in fact, they are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. So you can never exhaust Christ's compassion. But here's the kicker. Jesus actually wants his compassion to be experienced by everyone else as well. And he entrusts us to be the tangible experience of that compassion. If you read the story, Jesus is the one who drives it. Jesus is the one who said, I want these people's physical needs to be met. But who does he do it through? The disciples. It's the disciples' bread and fish. Some stories say it's a boy's, but it's someone else's food. It's someone else's provision. But Jesus takes it and blesses it. And then who distributes it to all these people? The disciples. So while it's Jesus' compassion that causes the miracle to happen, it is the disciples who are the tangible hands and feet of Jesus to those people. It's the disciples that take the bread and take the fish and actually say, here, may you eat and be satisfied. It's the disciples who make that happen. And that's where our role comes in. See, for us, we need to recognize that we are called to be Jesus' hands and feet. That, as one commentary said it, ministers of his provision. See, Peter, one of Jesus' closest disciples when writing to the church, said this in 1 Peter 3:8. Finally, all of you, be like-minded, be sympathetic, love one another, be compassionate and humble. See, Peter knew the importance of being a compassionate person. Peter was there that day when the 5,000 people were fed. And if you know anything about Peter, Peter's the guy who cut a guy's ear off. Peter's the guy who denied that he knew Jesus. Peter's the guy that was like, yeah, I'm going to walk on water, and then did, but then like lost faith and was like, oh no, now I'm drowning. Like, Peter's a bit of a wild character. I can imagine Peter being there and going, we've only got 5 loaves and 2 fish. Looking out at this crowd, I don't think that's going to be enough. I can imagine Peter being that guy, like, I can't do this. But here's the thing. Peter's life changes after Jesus' death and resurrection. There's this story in Acts chapter 3. Peter and John are walking to the temple. There's a lame man who's been lame since birth. He's there going, I need money, right? Peter sees him. It says actually in the Greek that he gazes upon him, which is to say he fixes his attention on him. He really sees the person. He sees his situation. He sees what he's going through and sees that he's asking for money. Now Peter goes, I don't have money. I don't have any gold or silver for you, but I see you. I see where you're at. I will give you what I have. I have Jesus, and in his name, walk. And this man gets up and walks. Peter literally picks him up and helps him walk again. This is Peter, who before couldn't spare 5 loaves and 2 fish to just feed some of the people in the 5,000. And now he goes, I don't even have gold or silver for you, man, but I do have this, and I will give you what I can. See, when compassion grips our heart, we will give what we can. Peter, when he let compassion grip his heart, he gave this man all that he could, which was Jesus. You know, when Jesus saw the crowd, compassion gripped his heart and he gave them all that he could. He physically healed them and provided for their physical needs. When Jesus saw your predicament with sin, compassion gripped his heart and he gave it all that he could in his life. And as compassion grips your heart, you will give all that you can. Now, you may be here this morning, as I said, you may literally be here and be like, Ben, I'm just about to turn 12 years old. I don't have much to give. Maybe some of you are sitting like here 16, 17, you're thinking the same thing. I don't have much to give. If anything, I don't have any money, I don't have any skills, I don't have any education. I'm not a hugely influential person. I'm not in politics, I'm not in anything like that. Like, I don't really have anything that I can give. But I would challenge you on that. That actually, I think for many of you, you have some things to give. You have time to give. You have love to give. You have your prayers to give. There's so many things for us to give. If we let compassion grip our heart, it will compel us to do something about what is going on. Maybe for some of you, you will be compelled by what is happening downstairs below us this morning. There's a whole bunch of kids down there who are being told about the love and grace of Jesus. But some of them are living in circumstances where they don't know or feel that. Where things are hard at home. Where things are really dysfunctional. Where there's a lot of pain and hurt and brokenness. And actually you could be the compassionate expression of God's heart to them by giving up your time to go and serve them and minister to them, to love them, to care for them. Maybe for some of you, you could just very simply decide that you want to pray for people. You don't even know who's in need or what's going on, but you just go, I'm just going to pray that the people who are doing it tough, God would be with them and that they would know his presence and his provision. Maybe you just pray for people. But I think you've got a lot more available to you than you realize. And if you, just like in this miracle, are willing to give God what you have, when you couple it with God's compassionate heart for people and his power, incredible things can take place. I want to share 2 stories to kind of draw this home. We've been, as a church, kind of going through Gateway Beyond. Today is Flavors of Beyond. There's going to be a whole bunch of food down in the foyer area after the service. And all of the money that's raised from that goes to support the missionaries and the ministries of Gateway here that are in 31 different countries around the world. Now, I've had the privilege of going over to a couple of countries and seeing some people and the missionaries over there and the work that they do. And I want to tell 2 stories from it. First is of a couple named Rob and Liz and their family. Rob and Liz are over in northern Thailand and Myanmar, and they do a whole bunch of work over there. But Rob and Liz are a real privilege to see in work, in action. I remember sitting over there with them at the back end of 2019. We'd flown over there, and I'm watching them minister to people groups that are ostracized from their society, hated by their nation, a people group called the Shan. They actually have faced genocide, like they've been just slaughtered just because of who they are. They've been totally displaced from their natural communities solely for racist reasons. And we just don't like, the Myanmar people just don't like them. And they have forced them up into the hill countries to hide so that they don't get killed. But Rob and Liz are there sharing the love of Jesus with them. They're training pastors to build churches. They're seeing youth and young adults find hope in Jesus. And ultimately, what I remember most clearly is one day on this trip, we are going on a hike to visit a tribe right at the top of one of these hills. Now, this was not just get in a car and go up it. Like, the road was so bad that you couldn't drive up it in a car. You had to hike it. And this was a hike that took multiple hours. Like, I wish I'd had my Apple Watch back then. I would have tracked it and set a whole bunch of records for kilojoules burnt, amount of exercise, all that kind of stuff. This mountain was so bad that Ben Island was on the trip with us. We took all of his backpacks off and everything, and he still struggled so much that this random guy, literally a random Shan man just on a motorbike riding up the hill, we just stopped him and was like, "Excuse me, sir, can he please get on the back of your bike and can you take him up the hill a bit because he can't keep going?" It was a serious hike. Ben did get better after he had a bit of an asthma puffer and whatever, but he wanted me to add that in for his own reputation's sake. But it was a serious hike, right? We had to carry all of our supplies, we had to carry our lunch, we had to carry all of our gear all the way up this hill. It was brutal. I consider myself relatively fit, and I was sore for days after it. Pretty sure Ben's still sore. It was 18 months ago. It was that kind of a hill. But they do that because they have this deep compassion for these people. They care about them. They can't help but go and do something to fix their situation, to go and run classes, to go and train pastors, to go and share the love of Jesus with this people group who feel like nobody wants them. In fact, everybody would rather that they're gone. But Rob and Liz are up there sharing Jesus with them. Second story is that of an incredible woman named Lyndall Brunner, who's one of our longest serving missionaries, who's been over in Thailand for nearly 25 years, maybe even more. It's somewhere around there. And she's given 25 years to go and live in Thailand. And she started an organization called Lift Thailand that do a whole bunch of work with widows and orphans who are trying to stay out of poverty and she works with her team to create income for them. I was sitting in this house with a grandma and a grandpa who, unfortunately, I think it was their daughter had died, and so had her husband. And so now these grandparents are in charge of raising their granddaughter. But the grandfather is really sick. He can't work. And so they have no real way to generate an income to provide for their granddaughter. So she can't go to school. She can't get an education. Instead, she has to stay back and try and help them work to create an income so that they can just get enough money to have food, right? And I'm sitting there with them, hearing the story of how Lyndall and her team came in, just gave them a few chickens to start with, and they started getting eggs and selling eggs and making some money, and then they were able to buy some more chickens and make some more eggs and get some more money, and then they were able to start buying vegetables and fruit and get enough for themselves, but also some left over so they could go and sell them on as well. And all of a sudden now, their granddaughter is able to go to school every single day, get an education, because they have a source of income. In a place where there was no hope, where people were doing it really tough, the compassion of Christ compelled Lyndall to go overseas and spend 25 years of her life bringing hope into these dark and difficult situations. Now, I'm not standing up here this morning saying, "You guys ready to go overseas and be an overseas missionary?" Because some of you are genuinely 12. That's not happening. But I do think there is a challenge for all of us. As I said before, you might not think that you have much, but you have love, you have time, you have prayers. Maybe some of you even do have the ability to go home and talk to your parents and say, "Hey, let's sponsor a child," or "Hey, can we give to some of the work of Gateway Beyond? Hey, can we donate food to the care center here? Can we do something to help those in need?" Will you let compassion grip your heart this morning and compel you to do something to help those who are in desperate need? Will you pray? Will you serve? Will you give your love to others? Will you ask your parents and maybe, even yourself, if you've got a part-time job or you get some pocket money for doing some chores, to contribute to helping someone in need around the world? What will you do? Will you do something though? Will you do something? I'm going to invite the band up because we are going to sing together in a moment. But before we do, I actually just want to give us an opportunity to pray. I want to pray over each and every single one of you that God would place something in your heart for you to do. And genuinely, there's so many options. I think you could be serving in kids. You could, to give them an experience of God's love. You could be here on the welcome team, being a warm, welcoming smile, helping other young people feel like this is a place where they can be who they are and belong and be a part of it. Maybe you want to stand on stage and declare the goodness of God's love and grace to give hope to people who maybe are in this room, even this morning, who need that. Maybe for some of you, it will be that you're going to decide to get your parents to sign up, or even you yourself, to like the Beyond email list. You get an email each month with what God is doing through different missionaries and ministries here at Gateway Beyond. And you might see what's going on and be able to pray for them. I don't know what it is, but I think there is something that for each of us, if God's compassion for his people will also grab our heart, that we'll be compelled to do something. And because of that, we'll help make the world just a little bit better. So let me pray. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, we thank you for being here with us this morning. We thank you for your love and for your grace. And Lord, we thank you that it was your compassion that actually sent you to the cross to die in our place. And I pray this morning that we would have an experience where your compassion for those in need would grip our hearts. God, I pray that you would place something in there for each of us to do. Lord, I pray that you would raise up prayers. Lord, I pray that you would raise up people who would give their time and serve, Lord. I pray that you would raise up people who would stir up generosity in their families or in their friendship groups. Lord, I pray that you would raise up givers. But Lord, I even just pray in the future, Lord, that you would raise up people to go on short-term teams, to see what it is that you're doing around the world. Lord, I pray that you would even raise up within us, Lord, people here who would go on long-term trips, who would be like the Rob and Liz's and the Lindels, Lord, that they would decide to give up many years of their life to go and compassionately give, be your hands and feet to those so desperately in need. And God, I pray all this in your mighty name. Amen.